welcome to the iPod Touch 4th Gen Ultimate Repair Guide. So let's just get straight into it. In order to open this one up, we'll have to take that screen off first. So yeah, a lot of the time they'll already be cracked because that's probably the most common thing that fails on this. But if it isn't cracked, just know there's a pretty high chance of cracking it while opening it up. Because yeah, in order to open it, we've got to take that screen off first. And it is just glued on, so yeah. It is possible to take it off without cracking it. In fact, it's pretty easy once you get the hang of it, but until you're used to it, it can be a bit difficult just knowing where you can put the knife and stuff, I guess. Yeah, so let's just get into it. So you want to heat up along the bottom, that's where most of the adhesive is. There's also a strip along the sides on where the bezel is, and a tiny bit at the top as well, but it's not the full bit of bezel at the top, it's just like the very top part where there's glue. Yeah, and you do want to be careful of the Wi-Fi antenna, which is in the top left corner there underneath. So yeah, just heating it up, take a box cutter knife, and I like to do 2 gentle slices up the sides first, not pushing it too far in because you've also obviously got the LCD there, and that is pretty easy to damage, especially if it's already intact. Yeah, if you do have a cracked glass, you don't have to worry about that though, because they are one piece on this model, the LCD and the glass. So if you're replacing the screen, you're not salvaging that. You're not doing a glass only on this model. It's just far too difficult. So yeah, just follow what I'm doing here. Peel from the bottom, and then fold it open like that, and you'll see that Wi-Fi antenna will stick to the top of the glass there, and that can be a bit easy to rip. And then in this case, the connector popped out by itself, but the what do you call it? That's the LCD connector up there at the top there, and you see that tiny ribbon there. That is for the touch as well, and that attaches behind the logic board. So, I mean, if you're replacing the screen, you don't have to really worry about it. But if you want to keep it intact, you really have to be careful of that, because it's paper thin and it will break very easily. And if it's your first go, yeah, it's probably better off you just buy a new screen as well, because salvaging that is pretty difficult. I mean, yeah, it is possible and it is doable with experience, but with all phone repairs, if you're opening a model for the first time and you don't really know like how much force you can use on certain components, there's always a very high chance of breaking stuff, even if you've done a bunch of different phones before. That's the thing, because every model's different. Everything goes together in different ways and has different sizes of parts and all that stuff. So yeah, the next thing we have to do is remove that plate there, and there's just 6-8 screws holding that in. They're all different sizes as well. The 3 at the bottom are the long ones. There's 2 with blue Loctite, and then 1 with brown. That's a slightly longer one. Then there's 3 small ones that go along the side, and then the 2 up the top there. The 3 at the side are the same size, the 2 at the top are the same size, and the 3 at the bottom are the same size. But don't mix them up, because if you put them in the wrong way, then it just won't go back together that well. Yeah, and this is glued in a little bit as well, so just heat up in those 2 spots that I heat up, along the bottom and along top there, and using a plastic pry tool to just gently lift that up, pry that up. And be careful around the speaker there, down at the bottom, because sometimes you can pop the speaker out and accidentally rip the wires. And yeah, so just pop that little protective piece of metal over the camera there off. Comes off pretty easily. And now there's another 3 screws along the top there. 1 on the camera, 1 on the logic board, and 1 on the Wi-Fi antenna. Just unscrew those. And yeah, now we're ready to remove that touch ribbon cable. So just prying the camera up a little bit. And now, so yeah, in order to remove that ribbon cable, we have to sort of bend the logic board up and out of the way. Now, that does sound very dodgy, and it kind of is, because we're like flexing the logic board on an angle which just doesn't seem like a normal thing to do. And especially since that's a really thin piece of PCB going down the side there as well, it feels like you're going to break it the first couple times you do it. But yeah, as long as you don't bend it too far, it should be alright. And also, just be careful of the volume button flex there as well, because that at this stage is still soldered to the logic board. You could always remove that first if you're a bit worried about it, but yeah, you don't have to. You can definitely get the screen out without taking that off. So yeah, just as I do, use the plastic pry tool to sort of loosen up all the adhesive and stuff like that. Peel back that copper tape, yeah, and then just pop it out like that. Now if you're just doing a screen replacement, that's as deep as we have to go. But if you want to do buttons and battery as well, I'll show that later in the video. But yeah, just take your cracked screen and salvage the home button. And there's also this metal piece along the top of here that most replacement screens don't come with, so we're gonna have to poach that. And in order to do that, just heat up the glass at the front and take your box cutter knife and you just get that off there. It will also have a bunch of adhesive attached to it that we'll have to clean up later as well. So just take that and put that to the side. We can just toss that LCD out. Yeah, maybe you'll think I've got a cracked screen, but my LCD still functions. Can I do a glass only repair? And pretty much, unless if you're an expert at glass only repairs, the answer on this model is no, because they just break that easily. This particular iPod, the LCDs don't recover from heat damage, which a lot of other LCDs do. If you've seen Jerry rig everything, he'll like take a lighter to an LCD screen and it'll recover. If you do that on the iPod Touch 4th gen, it will never recover. And heat is needed in order to do a glass only repair. So yeah, I've tried it a bunch of times. My success rate was probably less than 10%. So it's not worth doing glass only repairs on the 4th gen, unfortunately. So yeah, you're always better off just buying a brand new LCD and touchscreen assembly. Yeah, so in order to take the battery out, we'll have to unsolder both the battery and the buttons in order to get the logic board up enough to remove the battery. So just come over to soldering iron, and before we actually unsolder it, what we have to do is scrape back the there's a bit of rubber coating over all the solder joints that we need to get at. So yeah, just take your tweezers, give it a bit of a scrape. You'll be able to see it. Yeah, just need to get rid of that stuff. So both on the battery and on the buttons flex there. I mean, you could solder straight over it, but I know it's probably not the best for your soldering iron. Probably releases some not too good fumes as well. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend it. Just get it out with the tweezers. And then yeah, just put some flux on first. If you don't know what flux is, I can't give a good enough description. It makes the solder flow better. It stops the solder from oxidizing as quickly, and it just makes it stickier and work better. So I don't know. If you do stuff like this often, just get a tube of flux. Always makes the solder work better. It's not 100% necessary, but just makes life easier, I guess. Yeah, so just take your solder, rub over those joints as I do in the video. It should come out. Yeah, just get them all heated at once and then just lift up with the tweezers. Don't pull, really, because it is easy to just rip these flex cables. Remember, they're basically paper thin. It's probably about the same strength as a bit of sticky tape, so yeah. Yeah, and the reason we have to remove the volume button ones as well is because in order to get that battery out, we have to lift up that logic board there. Yeah, and be careful of the flex, the Wi-Fi flex when you do that, because it is attached to this copper sort of heat spreader type thing. So in order to take that battery out, yeah, I usually just lift that up and then grab the tweezers and just pry behind. Obviously trying not to poke the battery with the tweezers. Yeah, and that battery should just come straight out. Yeah. And yeah, at this stage, if we're just doing a battery replacement, we can stop there and put it back together. But if you want to go further for whatever reason, say, basically the only other reasons we want to keep going is to do a button replacement of that button flex cable there, or also the a bad charge port. The charge port's a pretty difficult repair, to be honest. You will need a hot air rework station because it's soldered onto the board, and it takes a bit of practice as well. It's not something you'll probably be getting on the first try. So I don't know if that's worth it or not to you. If it's just a one-off, probably not. But yeah, so in order to change those buttons, in order to take the logic board out first, it's still glued on at the bottom there, so we just take the hot air gun and heat it from behind, and once it's hot enough, the adhesive will just loosen up and then we just simply take it out. Being careful of the speaker there, don't want to rip that off, and we have to unplug the headphone jack as well, so make sure you do that first. And then simply that logic board will just come out. Yeah, and if we want to do those buttons, it's pretty straightforward. Just unscrew those 2 screws, take that piece off, go over to the power button, unscrew those 2 screws, and then very gently peeling it all back. We can use isopropyl alcohol and heat to soften up that adhesive, which will definitely make it a lot easier. And just be very careful. I use the flathead tweezer sort of thing for this, and that's probably the easiest one, just slowly peeling it back, and it should work pretty well. And it's basically the same thing for putting it back in. You can either get a brand new button flex, or you can just poach one from another iPod, which is usually the way to go. It's usually cheaper, and yeah, usually if you're fixing a lot of these, you'll have a bunch of other ones that'll have perfectly functional buttons in them as well. So yeah, just poaching is better. And yeah, it's basically just put it back together the same way you took it apart. Not much to say there. Pretty easy. Yeah. And also, with that logic board out, if you have a dead camera, both back and front, 90% of the time, it's probably a water damage issue. There's an array of little circuitry under the back camera there. A lot of the time what will happen is one of your cameras won't open. Like, you'll open the app and the camera will just freeze. So if that's what's happened and you've got water damage in that particular area, you're pretty much out of luck. But if you can always try replacing the cameras. So in order to do that, yeah, just pop them off, the Lego style connectors, get a replacement, try it out. Yeah, and again, replacement parts, you can buy them individually, but it's always better to just get them from another iPod, usually cheaper. Yeah, this is also a good stage to replace the Wi-Fi antenna as well, although that rarely breaks. If you're replacing the Wi-Fi antenna, it's mostly because you've ripped it while taking it apart 99% of the time. So yeah, I think I've had once where a Wi-Fi antenna has been actually faulty. Yeah, so now just putting them back together, just get that logic board in there, put that battery in there, make sure we've attached all our cameras and everything. Now we just have to resolder both the buttons and the battery. I always do solder the buttons first and then the battery, because we don't want to be putting power into the iPod while we're soldering on other components. And that goes for the opposite when taking it apart. You want to take the battery out first before you take out the buttons, because yeah, things can go bad if we send heat, if we start soldering on components while there's power running to it. Can cause short circuits and stuff, and just that heat coming onto a board that's powered on is just not good. And yeah, I would, for the button flex here, it's pretty small, so it is kind of difficult to see what you're doing. And especially if you're using like low quality solder and stuff, sometimes those balls can like mix together behind the back of the flex, and it's hard to tell. There's been so many of these iPods that I've opened up that other people have worked on, and that connector's just absolutely annihilated, botched, whatever word you want to use. So yeah, a good tip I would recommend is if you don't have a microscope, just use like a magnifying glass or something, anything to improve your vision there. With the microscope, you can, because the flex is a bit clear, you can see behind if you've got any balls touching. But what I'm trying to say is you don't want the joints touching each other behind the flex because you did a poor solder job. If you don't have the right tools, that's pretty easy to do. So yeah. Yeah, so before we put the screen back on, we've got to clean up those 2 parts that we took out earlier that had adhesive on them. First is the that metal bracket that was attached to the top of the screen, and also the mid plate. So the way we clean those up is just with some isopropyl alcohol. So yeah, simply just copy of what I do here. Grab your alcohol, peel back the old stuff, give it a scrub with the whatever, your pry tool, your box cutter, whatever you need to use. Just get it 100% clean. If you don't have isopropyl alcohol, I don't know, just get it. You're not going to get it clean without it, probably. You can probably just use your finger and scrape it back, but that'll take a while. And you'll have all these oils from your fingers on it, which the new screen won't stick as well if that's the case. So yeah, just get some alcohol. It's the best way to do it. Yeah, just cleaning it up. Just copy what I do. I don't know if my commentary is providing any extra benefit over the video. Maybe, maybe not. Who knows? The video shows you what to do anyways. So just watch the video. Yeah, so if you have a faulty home button and it isn't clicking or registering the click, it's a pretty common issue, but it's a pretty easy fix as well. What will happen is usually that black bit of plastic at the top will completely wear out, as you can see here. So yeah, you can just get a replacement flex cable. They're pretty cheap, usually like $1. Yeah, and just take the old one off the mid plate. Give it a good clean with isopropyl alcohol, otherwise the new one won't stick properly. And then yeah, just put the new one on as I'm doing here. There are some holes on it that you can line up so you get it in the right place and everything, but it's pretty easy, pretty straightforward. It's just like a little sticker. Yeah, as you can see, it takes quite a while to get all this adhesive off. Pretty bad. I wish they just used screws for these things, but no, apparently you have to be gluing everything together. Oh, yeah. And now just applying some adhesive. You can use either some high strength double-sided tape. I usually recommend the black 3M stuff. Or I've recently just found this new super glue called B7000. It's a super glue that's appropriate to use in phones and mobile repairs and stuff, because most super glues are just no good for mobile repairs. Most of them dry, like most of the high strength super glues will dry really hard, and if you use those on glass, the glass will just crack. So yeah, they're no good. Then there's other super glues that'll be way too weak and they won't dry it, but they won't dry hard. But yeah, those aren't appropriate either. But this B7000 stuff, it's like a rubbery type of glue that provides just enough movement for that screen not to crack, but it's also high strength at the same time, so it's really appropriate for use in mobile phones. I don't use it in the video, but yeah, you could use that stuff, definitely, for sure. It's also sort of waterproof as well. Not that using it will make the phone waterproof, or the iPod waterproof, but yeah, if you fully sealed around the outside, it might help. And yeah, just placing that back in that position there, it's pretty easy to line up because you got that coloured hole to line it up with. I think that's for the ambient light sensor or something. And you got to put your home button in at this stage as well. So just cleaning up the there'll usually be a lot of gunk from the previous owner just around the outside there. So just scrape that back with some tweezers and place that in the hole. If it's not sticking, just put some tape around the sides. But I think we're all right in this case. And yeah, now plugging that screen back into the iPod. First, we want to get that touch connector in. Can be pretty difficult, like I said, because we've got to pry up that board there, and it's hard to tell when you've got it in sometimes. So yeah, just go slow. Don't, yeah, try your hardest not to rip that touch connector. Now plugging that screen in as well. We'll do a test at this stage, because yeah, just to make sure we've plugged everything in correctly. And also the screens have a pretty high failure rate as well, so we just want to test them out. Doesn't matter how many times they've said they've been tested on AliExpress or eBay, they never are. you're always going to get faulty ones, so you got to test it every time. Yeah, so just booting it up here. And yeah, the thing you want to be testing for is the touch functionality. So just grab one of the apps and move it all around the screen, see if it works. Test your volume buttons, test your lock button, check both the cameras, check your headphone jack, check your speaker, and if it's all good, maybe check your Wi-Fi as well, and your home button. A lot of stuff to check, but if it's all good, then you can keep going. If not, figure out what didn't work and then go back. Yeah, maybe also check for dead pixels on the LCD as well, so just bring up like a white screen. I know it looks like I got some there, but that's just like glue or something. Yeah, yep, headphones as well. Alright, and yeah, before we get this LCD actually glued down, you'll notice that one of the corners on the iPod here has actually been bent, and that's going to prevent the glass from going in properly. And that's quite often the case with these. These will get dropped, they'll land on a corner will cave in, and that'll crack the whole screen. And then, yeah, when we go to put the new screen in, it won't fit properly. So a couple of things we can do here. We can either get the pliers out and try and bend it back. That usually works pretty well, especially if it's just a minor sort of bend. Another thing we can do is sand it down, which I think is what we'd end up doing in this video. That's more appropriate on real bad dents, I reckon. But yeah, it probably looks a bit worse since we're actually taking like a chunk out of the side. But I'll show you how to do that, and I'll show you how to get it looking pretty decent as well. So yeah, take your screen back out, find your corner that's bent. Yeah, and this one we just file it down. Take your file, just do the very corner. You don't want to get too much off, and just sand down until it's basically flush with the rest of the thing. Yeah, so we really just want to take out that bit of bezel there that's been bent over and create a flat surface for the screen to go on. And there we go. Now at this stage you'll notice that it kind of looks a bit sharp. So to fix that, we'll just take the I don't know what we call this thing, the sanding tool, and just shave down the side there to match the bezel to match the angle of the bezel on the rest of the housing. And you can get it looking pretty good. You can make it look basically like you haven't shaved down anything, and that just that plastic bit has been missing. Yeah, so the angle matches around the whole side of the housing. And once you've done that, you just grab the screen and do a test fit. You can just put it in like the screen side up, like the opposite way, and you just test fit it like that. Yeah, and you want to make sure you get rid of all those filings and stuff, because yeah, you don't want that stuff inside the iPod. If you think this looks too dodgy or too sketch, you can always just get a new housing. But yeah, quite often it's not going to be worth it, because these are older, cheaper models, so you just got to work with what you've got half the time. Yeah, and once you're happy with that fit there, just put it all back together. The reason we want to do this, we can't just put it back together with the bent corner, is because it's not going to sit properly, and two, it'll just end up cracking again. So yeah, if we can't get it in properly, that glass will just be sticking up, protruding, and then we're just going to drop it again and it's going to break, and the screen won't really be held in properly either. So yeah, you do want to get the corner good. And now after we've clipped that flex cable back in for the touch, just get your 3 screws back. Pretty simple. These are all different size screws again, so yeah, get like a metallic parts tray or something and keep track of them all, because yeah, it looks like a super amateur job when you get the screws in the wrong holes on this one. Yeah, just get them all back in there. I don't really have to commentate this. You know what you're doing. get that clip back on top of the camera there, and now putting down some adhesive. We want to put strips over the camera there, one over the Wi-Fi, and then that whole bottom bezel, pretty much, as we do in the thing. And then if you've got like some 1mm adhesive strip, just put strips up the side. I'm not sure if I do it in the video. We'll find out. But yeah, you want to get basically as much adhesive on the thing as you can. Don't put any behind the LCD because that's just gonna wreck it, pretty much. Yeah, you see that shiny metal thing on the back of the LCD? That's just held on with tape. So if you try and tape it from behind, if you ever have to remove it again, it's basically just gonna rip that off. And it's not really doing anything to hold it in place as well, so it's just, there's no point. Just don't put any at the back there. So yeah, just as I do, I use the tweezers and then just rip them down the sides like that. Most effective way. Peel them off. Yeah, as you can see, I didn't use any of that 1mm adhesive down the sides there, probably because I'd run out, but that's a good idea is to put some adhesive there as well. Or again, you could use the B7000 glue as well. Now, before we put this thing together, there is a specific way that touch flex cable needs to go in here. It folds in a specific way. Maybe I'll try and draw a picture of it in paint or something and put it on the screen, but if you do it the wrong way and it just sticks out into the behind the screen and in between that plate there, the mid plate, sometimes it can get crushed and then you'll lose your touch. So yeah, you don't want that to happen. Just make sure you do it properly. Yeah, and it can be pretty difficult to plug that screen in there as well at this stage. The LCD connector I'm talking about. So try not to mash that up. I've done that before. Just like forcing it in when it's not in the correct spot, and then you mashed up the connector and it's just stuffed. So yeah, be careful. Get that all down. Give it a firm press around all the outside. Oh yeah, and I should also mention, before we put that screen back on, you really want to make sure you got all the glass out from the last sort of screen that was there, because if you go to put the new LCD back on and you got shards of glass just sitting in there, sometimes what can happen is you go to press down the screen and then it'll just get like, there'll be a shard of glass behind it and you'll just send a massive crack straight through the LCD. Done that one a couple of times, so yeah, you just try to avoid that. And yeah, that's pretty much good to go at this stage. Just want to give it a wipe down, take off all the stickers and stuff that are on the back, give it a scrub with isopropyl alcohol. As you can see on the front, I've got some adhesive that sort of sticks over the side, so you just want to give that a wipe down as well. Or if you used glue, you can get the glue out there. But yeah, if you are going to go for glue, again, just go for the B7000. Everything else doesn't work for mobile repairs. If you just use some hard generic super glue that you buy from the supermarket, like, the screen's going to be so brittle, if you drop it even once, it'll just crack again. Yeah, that's probably the most amateur mistake you can make when repairing phones, is just using some cheap generic super glue from the supermarket. Most of them, like, they work pretty well for everything else, like they dry real hard, but when you glue a piece of glass to a piece of metal and it dries real hard, it becomes like extremely brittle. There's no movement whatsoever. And then if you drop it even once, even slightly, it'll just crack straight away. I found that one out the hard way. The first two phones I ever repaired, they were my own personal phones when I was like in high school or whatever. But like, you just drop them once and the whole screen just shatters because the glue just doesn't allow for any movement whatsoever. So and both those times, those screens cracked within like less than a month on the first, there. So just avoid that glue, don't use it, chuck it out. If you're going to use a glue in phone repair, you use B7000 or you don't use any glue at all. That's the way it is. Use a glue that's specifically designed for repairing phones. Yeah, and up until the other week, I didn't even know about B7000, so yeah. Yeah, and at this stage, we're pretty much done. I'll also cover speaker replacement. The speaker can sometimes fail. Usually doesn't, but a lot of the times if we're replacing the speaker, it's because we broke it while taking it apart. So yeah, it can be a pretty annoying thing to replace, just because it's hard to get the new one back in. So what you want to do, just heat up those two solder joints at the bottom. There's some sort of like hard paste, this orange pasty stuff holding the wires on as well, so you just want to get that peeled off as well. You just heat up the blobs and pull it out, flip it over to the back, and then we'll get rid of that orange pasty stuff, and then take your new speaker. A lot of the times I'll just poach them from another iPod, like I've said. But yeah, it can be pretty difficult to get the wires back in there, because we're trying to like jam already soldered wires into these tiny little holes that we can't even see. And the cables, they don't have any, like, they're basically as short as they can be already, so you can't really stuff it up. But yeah, in order to change the charging port, we'll have to remove that speaker as well, which is what we're doing here. So yeah, in order to change that charging port, what we want to do first is get some Captain tape, wrap it around the bottom there, and then put it in one of these like phone holding tools. This is one of the cheap ones that I'm using in the video, but it works pretty well. Then just take some flux and just absolutely soak the bottom there where all those pins are, and then grab your heat, put it on something pretty high, but like you got to keep in mind this board is extremely thin and there's other components right next to it as well. So yeah, I think I put it on like 390 or something, maybe probably 390 at 90% what do you call it, fan force. But you know, telling you what settings to use, I mean every machine's different, everybody holds the thing a different distance from the board, you know, so just find what works, I guess. Then yeah, just go back and forth heating up the solder from behind there and get some tweezers going and pull it out just like what I've done in the video. After we take it out, what I like to do, get some lead-free solder and just flow it all over the balls there. Just works better than the stuff that comes on it from the factory. Plus all the factory stuff will probably be just not good, oxidized and everything. You could use one of those some solder braid, solder wick, and take the old one off, but I don't know, I like to do it this way. Just flood it and then scrape the excess off, and then after a period of time it'll just be more of the lead free. Yeah, and as you can see, there's those two tabs at the sides. You want to get those sort of as free as possible as well. And you can do that, yeah, so to put it back in, just take your tweezers, hold it up against it, copy what I do. It took me like 10 tries to actually get one of these working the first time, so yeah, just practice on the 8 gig ones with the broken charge port. And then once you start actually fixing them, then you can do it on the 32s and the 64s. Because yeah, I mean 8 gig iPod Touch 4th gens, you can get a good one for like $40, including shipping now. So it's not even worth doing a charging port on an 8 gig anymore. It's only worth doing it if it's like a 32 or a 64, or if you've got some data on it or something like that. But yeah, pretty sure this one I'm showing in the video here didn't even work, so I don't even know. And yeah, that's pretty much it. There are a few other things you can fix on this iPod. Like for instance, quite common, the backlight will stop working, and then you'll open it up and you'll just find that backlight pin is just corroded a bit there. And in order to fix that, we can just replace the LCD connector. You'll need a hot air rework station for that, and it's just a simple job. Sometimes you can even use the same connector. Just heat it up, remove it, put new solder on. If the pad's still intact, which it usually is, it'll work, and then solder the old one back on. Maybe I'll include some footage of it, maybe not. I don't know. It's up to you. Probably worth it on a 32 and 64 gig, probably not on an 8 gig. Yes, this is probably the iPod that I'm most experienced with here. It was the first iPod I ever fixed, and probably the iPod that I've fixed the most of. I may have done nearly 1,000 of these at this stage. So yeah, once you get used to them, they're pretty easy and pretty hard to break, so that is a good thing. But like, I'd still say they are they're pretty fragile. They're on like the upper side of medium difficulty, I reckon, just because of how fragile they are, and just that terrible design with the fact that you have to bend the logic board in order to get the screen replaced is just like, who was coming up with this stuff? Seriously, I don't know if that's a standard practice that is used throughout the industry, but that just seems so dodgy. Like, these are hand assembled, aren't they? Like, they're probably breaking them left, right and centre in the factories if they have to do stuff like that just to get it together. It's crazy. But yeah, yeah, thanks for watching. If you liked the video, subscribe. Got a bunch of these videos out now, so if you want to watch another one, yeah, just have a look. If not, that's alright as well. Probably pretty boring unless if you're actually trying to fix one of yourself. So yeah, yeah, if you liked it, give it a like, subscribe, all that stuff. If you want to buy one, I sell them on eBay. Pretty cheap. It's probably way more worth to just buy one than fix your own, to be honest. I sell them for like $40. You can probably get one from China for like 30. So yeah. Yeah. See you next time. Bye.